Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this maxi skirt, which features a slit at the front. It's really easy and you don't need a pattern, so welcome. If you're new here, my name is Sandra and this is my space where I sew things that you can easily sew too. So let's get into the tutorial. The fabric I'm using is Ankara, also known as kitenge or Dutch wax print. It's 100% cotton and is a little stiff. The fabric you use will affect how flowy your skirt turns out. For tools, you'll need a sewing machine, something to cut your fabric with, elastic waistband, pins, an iron, a safety pin, and tailor's chalk. The pattern is very simple. Essentially, it's just a rectangle. For measurements, you're going to take two measurements. The first measurement is your hips, which is the widest part of your lower body. To this measurement, you're going to add 6 inches. This is going to make up the width of your skirt. Next, for the length of the skirt, you're going to measure at what point that you want the skirt to sit. As it's high-waisted, I started my measurement from above my belly button all the way to the floor. You're going to add 4 inches to this measurement, which you will need for the waistband and seam allowance. You will then need to cut this rectangle shape with these measurements onto your fabric. Here I'm measuring out the 51 inches for the waist. For the length, my fabric was a little bit shorter than the 49 inches I wanted. I didn't want to have to attach 2 pieces of fabric, so I just left the skirt a little bit shorter than I would have ideally liked. This is how the cutout fabric fits around me. For the top and bottom, because I used the edge of the fabric, I didn't need to hem this. I also didn't mind that black border being seen, so I just left this out. But if you had to cut through your fabric and you end up having frayed edges, be sure to hem these ends. Next, you're going to join the 2 sides of the skirt together. I'm going to use a French seam for this. Because of the type of fabric I'm using, it's hard to tell the right side of the fabric from the wrong side. So to help me, I used chalk to mark the right side of the fabric, which is the side I want to be showing on the outside when I'm wearing the skirt. For the French seam, you place the wrong sides of the fabric facing each other and then you sew a straight stitch as close as possible to the edge. Then you turn the skirt inside out and using an iron, press the seam so it's nice and flat. Next, sew a straight line along here and the goal is to encase the stitching that you did earlier. You sew all along down the skirt. I initially sewed too close to the edge and I ended up having to do a second stitch here, a little bit further from the edge. Once you're done, it should look like this on the inside where it's nice and neat. This will make the outside of the skirt. The next step is to add an elastic waistband to the top of the skirt. You want to use a thick elastic waistband that's at least 1.5 inches wide. It needs to stretch as much as the waist of the skirt that you're making. While the skirt is inside out, you're going to fold the top of the skirt. The fold needs to be wide enough for the waistband to fit, so use your waistband as a guide. Do this all around and pin as you go along, making sure it's as even as possible. Don't pin the waistband in, just the bottom of the fold where you'll be stitching. You're going to sew a straight stitch all along the bottom of this fold that you made. You'll need to leave a small gap which you will use to add in the waistband after. Add a safety pin to the end of the waistband and this will help you feed it through the gap. Pull the waistband through the skirt, making sure it's flat and even on the inside. Once you've pulled it through the other side, sew the ends of the elastic together using a zigzag stitch back and forth a couple of times. For the next part, we're going to sew 2 straight stitches all along the waistband. Use a stitch length of 4 for this part. For this, start off with a back stitch and as you sew your straight stitch, keep one hand on the back of your skirt and one hand at the front, keeping the elastic stretched throughout. Now try and keep your line as straight as possible and you're going to sew all along until you reach your original start point. Then do this a second time below your first line and again you want to do the same exact thing, keeping one hand on the back and one hand on the front of the skirt, making the elastic band stretch as you sew. Try and keep the distance between the first stitch and the second stitch the same so it's nice and even. After this, close up that little gap we had left earlier using a straight stitch. The end result should look like this, a nice and stretchy waistband. Next up, you're going to add a slit to the skirt. Using chalk or a pin, mark out where you want the slit to start. My point is here. Hold this point of the skirt and the bottom and turn it so that the line sits at the edge. You're going to cut out a triangle shape all along this point. The wider the triangle you cut, the wider the gap on your slit will be. Measure out the length of the slit. You're going to be making some binding for this entire edge to hide the seam. To do this, cut a strip of fabric to match this length. I cut 2 strips and attached them together using a straight stitch. Next, you're going to head over to your iron. Fold your strip like this and iron. Do this all along the piece of fabric. Then do this to the other side. Finally, fold this piece in half and iron all along till you have one nice piece of binding. Next, you're going to add this piece to the edge of the slit that you made. Start at the bottom of the skirt and pin this in place. Do this all along the slit. Once you get to the top, you're going to cut off any excess that you have. Fold the piece to hide the frayed edge. Then do this again to the other side. Now this part is the trickiest because you want to make sure that the top of the slit is nice and neat. After you attach this, you're going to sew a straight stitch all along the binding to attach it to place. Because the top of my skirt ended up looking messy, I did a zigzag stitch at the top to prevent it fraying, and then I created this little rectangle tab and sewed this along the top using a straight stitch. And this is the final result. The waistband makes it super comfortable, and it also means that it'll still fit me even with a little bit of weight fluctuation. I really hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Happy sewing, huns, and I'll see you in the next one.